Hey there, I'm on my way to a wedding 2 hours away. I don't know why I took this one. And I accidentally charged them the 1 hour fee for the travel fee. It should be double what I'm making for the travel fee. But when I looked it up originally I looked at the wrong place and I didn't want to go back and revise the contract. Anyway, complaining. Just watching videos and saw Brother Barry, and turns out he was on vacation, so that's good. He got some rest, and I was watching James Smith. I love James Smith. Anyway, as I was driving, at some point I started thinking about what is different that cries out for judgment. Are we really that bad? And one thing is that television, you got to be careful what you watch. I'm starting to understand again why it's so important to guard your heart. Watch what you watch, and myself included. I have some guilty pleasures. Game of Thrones, I watched that, and I probably shouldn't have. But anyway, here's why. Because you desensitize yourself to vile things. You desensitize yourself to violence. You desensitize yourself to adultery, fornication. A lot of these shows are just so wicked, you don't even know it because they're dressed in such a nice veneer. I'm not talking about Game of Thrones, but some of the other ones, just a sitcom or whatever. And yet, the protagonist is committing adultery, and you're put in a position where you're rooting for them in that situation. See, you don't know that that's affecting you. How's it affecting you? Is it going to make you go commit adultery? No, not necessarily. What it does is it desensitizes you so that you don't have the strength of feeling you should in terms of hating what God hates and loving what God loves. So it's like the frog in the boiling pot, you're just going along with the flow of the culture and you don't have feeling. And one thing, like Barry was talking about the shooting in Virginia, it's called a mass shooting. He was saying, look, 10 years ago we would have mourned as a nation. Now we're like, oh, people got killed. Mass shooting, that's not a mass shooting, there's only 12. Mass means 400. What's happened to us? We have been desensitized to all kinds of things so that we're numb in our feelings and have just accepted the culture where it is without having a strong reaction, which impacts our prophetic sense. It impacts our discernment and our ability to sense where we are as far as God's feeling and whether or not the sins are crying out to heaven. And, if you got Ma and Pa Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie and these godly people, and fast forwarded them to suddenly they jumped in time and stepped out into the United States in 2019, what do you think their thought would be when they see drag queens marching in the streets, dancing around, or teaching children in a library, or you see women marching with t-shirts that say "My Body, My Choice," and Paul Ingalls says, well, what does that mean? Oh, well, they're talking about their right to abort a baby. What? They're demanding that legislation be passed to enable them to abort a baby even after it's born. So I guess I'm trying to show you that should shock us. We should, but we have to be realistic. I'm not advocating legalism through restriction, but what I'm saying is that we're not shocked. We're just not really shocked right now at the culture's reaction to things and what they demand. And I was thinking about the letters to the churches. There's 7 churches that Jesus wrote letters to. 3 of them are, they existed at the time that Jesus wrote the letters, right? But they describe conditions, and in the order that those descriptions are presented, we see a map of church history, specific periods in church history that are identifiable. Like, you can clearly see what period in church history each church describes in sequence. From Ephesus to Laodicea, it's in order. If it was in another order, that wouldn't be the case. But we can see the apostolic church, we can see the persecuted church, we can see the beginning of mixture with the state, we can see the rise of the Roman Catholic system, and we can see the Protestant Reformation, we can see the Great Awakening, we can see the end times Laodicean church, right? Well, so that's true. And then 3 of the churches, the 3 of the letters, the first 3 are distinct in that they have, those characteristics have passed, those churches are not in view. Those characteristics are really not what the Lord is speaking to now. And the reason we know that is because the way the structure of the letters changes after the 3rd church, which I can't get into right now. But the last 4 all have references to his coming. And the message to the overcomer is inserted into the body, I believe. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. It changes its position. So I think in the beginning, the first 3, it was at the end of the letters, and in the last 4, it's inserted before the reward, which means it's important for us to have an ear now while we are on the earth waiting for his coming, and each one has a reference to his coming. Which means that the negative characteristics which he describes, and the positive, all persist until the end of the age. And in Thyatira, there is the Nicolaitan and the Balaamite way of influencing through abuse of authority, and also the wages of unrighteousness, working for a wage, and even being in bed with the state, so to speak, and taking salary and tax exemptions and all that, so that they are not a mouthpiece of the Lord, and seducing people through witchcraft, represented by Jezebel, by manipulating through fear and flattery to seduce them to, quote, commit fornication. So it's to bring people into immorality in the church through a top-down type of authority. That's what Thyatira is. And we see that in the charismatic churches, anywhere where there's this Nicolaitan type, conquer the laity type approach to authority, where the authority of the leadership is unquestioned, and what they teach you actually brings you into worldliness and sin. So that's a top-down type of, and really this is the culture of the world invading the church. All of those negative characteristics are the culture of the world that invade the church. So that's why there's a call to overcome, because he who believes overcomes the world. Where does he that is in me that is he's in the world? And as we see the worldly influences in the church, we overcome it spontaneously by our faith. But anyway, in the Roman Catholic days, the authority was top down, from the Pope down, through the kings. You had monarchs and all that, you know. Well, then in Sardis, you have kind of the same sort of authority. They have a reputation of being alive, They have a name that they live, but they're dead, and they're not watchful for the Lord's coming. So there's not outward sin per se like in Thyatira. It's more of a religious type of righteousness. But they're still dead, you know. And then Philadelphia is positive, but then the authority in Philadelphia is the Word. He who has the key of David, which is Christ, opens a door that no one can shut, and we can see so much in the Word as He opens revelation to us, and we've kept the word of His patience and not denied that His name, and there's so much to that. So the authority there is the Word. The authority in Thyatira is the top to bottom system of fear and flattery. The authority in Sardis is the name that they live, which it's like having a reputation that you're alive but you're dead, but also the name that you live is there. You know, during the time of the Reformation, there's all these movements. In the churches, it's Wesleyan, Methodist, Lutheran, you know, Calvinist. So many Lutherans have never read Luther. So many Methodists have never read Wesley. But they have a name that they live in. But they're dead, you know. They don't know. They're just... But then also nationally, are in politics, you were part of the French Revolution, or you were part of the Industrial Revolution, or everything is named. We've got names for all these periods, you know, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, all these things. That's all part of the characteristics of the world that we see show up in Sardis, of all these names other than Christ that people live and identify themselves with. And there's a temptation in the church to do the same thing, to be caught up in a movement. That's what that is. But Laodicea is different because the authority comes from the people. The Laodicea means the opinions or the rule of the laity, the average person. So this is the worldly aspect, the culture of a democratic society infringing on the church. So remember, he's speaking to the church, but he's talking about characteristics of the world. And I'm trying to talk about characteristics of the world, really, through the lens of these things. And the end times church is in a Laodicean rule of the people. The opinions of the people is what matters. And in America and in the West and in Europe, what we see is legislation that is the result. And politicians are basically put in power and given the ability to legislate based on the opinions of the people. So it's the people that cry out for the laws. It's not that the laws are the source of the wickedness. No, the laws are just a reflection of the people. The people are crying out for unrighteousness. And I was, with my cellist yesterday, and he's going, I had to go to get some hate chicken. He's talking about Chick-fil-A and he's calling it hate chicken. I just kept my mouth shut. He thinks he's being funny. But this is the way it is now, that culture, politics is a reflection of the culture, because we're in Laodicea in the West here, and people are marching in the streets wearing their "It's my body, it's my choice" shirts and fighting for abominations. Crying out for things that God judges. And I think that may be different than any other time in history, because Rome was exceedingly wicked. But that wickedness, what was the influence of the wickedness? It was the rulership was imposed from the top down. It was instituted. Yes, people had their wicked nature, but they were just mimicking the gods that were presented to them, and in their religion and in their that, the religion was not so much a reflection of the demand of the people. The people had to live under the morality and everything that the religion and the state supplied. So it was top down. And it's been like that all the way up until now. Now what you have in the West is people are crying out and begging for wickedness, demanding wickedness. Just, most Christians have Christian walls on Facebook. All their friends are Christians, and so they're kind of limited in terms of what they see. But I don't even spend any time on Facebook anymore, because my Facebook wall is entirely made up of acquaintances, musicians that have friended me over the years, and they're all secularist, new age, atheist, that type. And so my wall is a minefield of it's scary. I mean, it is scary sometimes, because you'll see a fervor sweep through, and all of a sudden your wall is just filled with cries against the righteous, cries against God, and cries for wickedness to be enthroned. And I'm being real general in how I'm speaking about it. But it's rooted in a hatred for God. People cry out for wickedness because they hate God. They think that they're fighting, those puritanical Christians. But what they really hate is God's law. And they hate, let us break the yoke, let us break off his bands. They hate Christ. And that is really what's being expressed in our culture. Almost everything that's happening politically in the United States is a wicked culture raising its fist at God. Yet we tend to not be that sensitive to it, because we are our sense, this is at least for me, I feel like my sense has been numbed. I'm not appalled the way I should be. I'm not grieved to the extent that I should be. I'm not furious to the extent that I should be, because of the things I've allowed myself to watch, where Romans talks about how you end up not only do you tolerate people doing these wicked things, but you even celebrate it. Well, that's that's kind of what you do. Now, I want you to know, I don't sit and watch TV all the time. I'm not saying that. But I do believe that sometimes I let myself watch things, or even things like just harmless shows. I mean, I was thinking about, we watch Fresh Off the Boat sometimes, and because it's funny, but some of the situations in there are designed to change your sentiments about certain things, And all the shows are like that. They're loaded with propaganda. You're being manipulated. And you don't know it because you think you're just laughing at the characters. But the things that you're laughing at, just stop and think about the values of what you're laughing at. The kid's dad is telling him, he's excited he's gonna maybe have sex the first time. They're advocating fornication, and you're like, I mean, it's bad. And what that does, I finally see that what that does is it changes your sensitivity. It's not that it makes you an evil person. That's not the fear. Although you can be drawn into lust and stuff like that. But the main thing is that it dulls your senses and dulls your sympathies and takes away some of your prophetic edge. So that's just what I've been thinking about while I'm driving. We'll see if this resonates with anybody. Take care.